comfortable with being recorded, please just let me know. If you want to share but don't want to necessarily be captured in this recording, we're happy to make accommodations for you. We're really excited for the information that we're going to share here today. We have amazing speakers. I've been working with them the last couple weeks to get this set up, and I think there's going to be some fantastic information to learn today. And I'm really excited for everyone here on the call, and thank you for being here also. Thank you so much to my presenters, and thank you so much to everyone who's going to be here. For the sake of saving bandwidth, I would love for, at this first point in the presentation, to have attendees turn their cameras off, but we would welcome and really invite and encourage you to turn your cameras back on during our discussion period later. It just helps to kind of save that bandwidth for presentations so they don't lag quite so much. And we really appreciate everybody being willing to do that. And I'm going to turn my camera off here in a little bit too. And so thank you again so much for being here. I'm really excited for the information that's going to get shared. We are going to give it one more minute and let people trickle in, but we want to start on time because we have so much great information to share and so many great presenters. And so I do see Wenix on the call, and so Wenix, I had wondered if maybe you'd provide an invocation, not quite yet, not just yet, but I wanted to touch base with you on that. And thank you again for being here. This is the Climate Adaptation Plan webinar series, and this is our 6th webinar focusing on the built environment. So we've had up to date quite a few webinars about natural resources centric, that also kind of touches on tribal culture and health. But now we get to talk about the role that the things that we build and engineer have in our indigenous food system and the climate change impacts that will be as a result of that. And so I am going to just get started. Thank you all for being here. Just one more reminder to save on bandwidth. We'd love to turn cameras off for this first part of the presentation, and we will be inviting people to turn their cameras back on during the discussion period. And so we are going to be muting people who might not realize that they're unmuted. And so if you do want to say something later in the discussion period, there will be an opportunity for that, and we'll have people unmute themselves and chat. And so with that, I am going to go through my just introduction slides. I would love if Aaron, you could let me know that you're seeing and hearing me okay?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. And so again, some housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded later this afternoon for viewing. Thank you, Aaron, so much for moderating and for letting me bother you with questions about whether people are seeing and hearing what they're supposed to be. I really appreciate you doing that. We will have an opportunity to field questions. We're gonna do it a little bit differently today. We have a number of presenters who are presenting on different topics, and so we will take clarifying questions at the end of each one of the presentations, but we'll save some of those bigger, more discussion period questions towards the end for our discussion session. And so if you want to, you can just go ahead and throw those questions in the chat whenever you think of them, and we'll get to them. And lots of times we have discussions in the chat going during the webinar also that we'll try and pull into the conversation. Thank you again for your engagement and for being here today. We, as always, look for discussions that are positive and look towards the future and are respectful, and our critiques are always welcome, but we want to make sure that we're leaving space for everybody and being respectful of everybody. We always have that raise hand option if you want to say something, but that will be more for the discussion period, and we'll go through the etiquette of that a little bit later when we reach that point. So now I would love to check in with Wenix and see if you would be willing to give us some starting words today to kind of kick us off.
Yes, I wasn't really prepared for that, but thank you for calling me. Tatsmewe inam latiwa kahim yuma inam wanakisa Wenix wahia elp. Thank you, Creator Pusha, for looking after us and for being here with us through this time. I'm very proud of our community and pray that we can continue to get through everything we're looking forward to. We have a bright future looking forward, and we will be hopefully coming back to the office soon and starting to get back into the real world. I pray that all of your families are looked after and that we can continue to do great things within the future. I am very excited for this webinar because I really don't know a lot about what's been going on lately related to us moving forward with the building projects and when we're looking at our infrastructure of what we're doing to provide things for the future of our homes. And we've done some really great infrastructure within our tribal economics. And so it's really great to see, but we do see those impacts that have been through climate and how that affects our buildings and our things within our floodplains and how we're going to move forward. And I'm very excited to hear our presenters talk and to be here with you guys and really get into the great work that Colleen's doing with looking at all these different subject matters and how it pertains to climate. And so thank you, Colleen, and thank you, presenters, and can't wait to hear all of you move forward and be able to provide input if I can related to anything at the end of the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you letting me put you on the spot like that. I want to just talk a little bit about where we are kind of in the Climate Adaptation Plan. We have started out our conversation with the very most important of the first foods, the water. And so we talked first about our surface and groundwater impacts. We've spent the last couple webinars focused on the first foods themselves. So we started with the fish species and moved into our big game discussions and closed it out with a really great presentation on the women's foods, the roots and the berries of the tribal culture. And so now we're really excited to kind of branch out from the first foods themselves to the other parts of our food system that we interact with first foods. So we have roads and bridges that we use to access first foods and treaty rights. We live in houses that protect us and keep us safe and shelter us. And we work in government buildings, facilities that house, the seats of government. And so these are really important things that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really excited because this is not my field of expertise. And so we have some really experienced and expert people here today. And so I, without further ado, think I'm just going to go ahead and give it over to them. And so I would love, JD, if you want to take it away.
Certainly. Thank you, Colleen. Just as an introduction for people who don't know me, I'm JD Tuvey. I'm the planning director at the Umatilla Indian Reservation here in Pendleton. And what we'll do is we'll go over a few things. I think Holly, and we have a recording from our transportation planner. She pre-recorded a little snippet for her portion of it. And then I believe Sam, our environmental health and safety officer, will be having a small little piece as well. The breadth of what we'll be talking about is like some of the capital improvements projects, some of the ways that we're trying to improve that process, taking it into resource utilization, reduction of water, and those other things like that. And then I'll kind of wrap up my piece. I know we only have about half an hour, 40 minutes, so we'll try and get through as much as we can. There's tons of information. But then I'll kind of wrap up with some kind of general thoughts on the future of our infrastructure projects and major building projects. So I don't know, Holly, do you want to go first? Or do we want to do Danny's first, Colleen?
I'd be happy to go first, or we can do Danny's, either way.
Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Well, I'm going to talk through some of my slides. They just have words on them mostly, and then I will share at some point. But so what we're going to talk about is some of the things regarding climate resiliency for the built environment, what the Tribal Planning Office is already doing, and touch on some additional things that perhaps we could do. And I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity to talk and brainstorm across departments. It's been really instrumental in learning what other departments are doing so we can collaborate better. So some of the things that the Tribal Planning Office is already doing, we have our comprehensive plan, a sub-area plan for the mission community. We have our development codes and permit process. We have our capital improvements plan, And I also want to touch on the hazard mitigation plan. So regarding the comprehensive plan, this talks about what are the tribe's goals and how we want to achieve them. It helps to keep us on track by setting benchmarks and monitoring progress. And I want to share now the screen. Does that show up for you?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and I just want to show you how easy it is to get to the comprehensive plan on our website. If you go to the main CTUIR page, I'm going to slide over to the where you can see it. And then if you search for planning.
Holly, I think we might only be able to see your slides right now.
Oh, will it take a minute to show up or?
It might. I think if you use the share function of just the PowerPoint window, it's only going to share the PowerPoint window. But I think if you pick that selection to the far left, it's going to be able to follow you in the way that you're moving on your computer. So you might want to unshare and share again.
Okay.
Sorry for the complication.
So, hold on.
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
I already realized that I messed up and I didn't even show you guys my speaker introduction slide. So this is the way that the day is going to go, unfortunately.
All right. I think, here we go.
Oh, perfect. Yep, that looks like it'll do it.
You see it?
Yep, we see the web page.
So if you go to the website and you search for planning, and you can see that long range planning comes up. And if you click on that, you can scroll down and there's a link to the comprehensive plan. Now the comprehensive plan has many different elements in it. And I just want to highlight that there's a couple, that there's policies in here that are really great on the subject of climate adaptation. So for instance, under economy, I'm just going to search for that policy 5.2, and one of the economic policies is to diversify the tribe's public sector economy by creating and strengthening CTUIR and enterprises. And actually the one I wanted was number 5, plan for long-term economic security in the face of changing global environmental and economic conditions. So that's really relevant. And some of the ways that that's proposed to be done is by having a diverse economic plan, not only the casino, but other businesses as well, and support small businesses. Another one we have in here is 5.15 is our energy policy, energy element. And the first objective here is to enhance tribal sovereignty through energy independence. And then there's, various strategies and monitoring benchmarks to monitor how those are being achieved. One of the ones that planning works on a lot is housing. And that has some great policies in it. Expand the number of and types of all housing units on the reservation for tribal members at all income levels. So I want to talk about some of the ways that we have been working to achieve those housing policies. So now are we back on the presentation?
Yes, we see the PowerPoint.
Implementing the housing policy by last year, we changed the land development code to allow accessory dwelling units. This allows an extra living unit on each property in the residential zones that's not in the flood zone, maximum size of 1,000 square feet. And so creating more housing opportunities across residential zones in the reservation. A second policy, second initiative is that the neighborhoods that we're creating, we want to be close to employment and services and be walkable. And so we are working on a subdivision just west of the Transit Center, which has recently been named the Nick Yahweh subdivision. And that is going to have nice streets with street trees and sidewalks. It's also going to have alleys for access. And the zoning that we created for it allows small lots, as well as the accessory dwelling units. And there are some lots that will be zoned for neighborhood services, where a few small scale commercial and service uses can be located close to the residential. This is the example of a street profile that we're likely to see in the Nick Yahweh subdivision. And this subdivision was really, the visioning for it was started as part of the Mission Community Plan update. There was various technical reports that were done looking at housing demand, transportation needs, and zoning as well. And so that informed the vision that's now occurring with the Nick Yahweh subdivision. This subdivision is under review right now, and the hearing on it is before the Land Protection Planning Commission on March 23rd. Another way that the planning department can help with climate resiliency is through our land development code. These codes are zoning helps to protect the resource lands. We have requirements for setbacks from streams to help protect the streams and the structures that might be located near them. And we have our flood overlay zone that we adopted a number of years ago adjacent to the Umatilla River to restrict where development can be located so that houses don't end up getting flooded. Now, we did have a flood last year where some homes were flooded out, and most of those were either in the floodway or in the flood plain, the 100-year flood plain. And the river is changing over time. And so one of the things that's happening is that there's going to be a remapping of the floodplain, and that's in process by FEMA. And I just wanted to mention that the flood hazard overlay zone that we've adopted makes the reservation eligible for FEMA flood insurance. And so right now there's a hazard mitigation grant that's being used to purchase 11 properties that were flooded out during the floods last year. In addition to the remapping of the floodplain, another way that planning could plan ahead would be to track areas that are being flooded and keep track of that in a public place as the river changes. I think that will be helpful for us and for residents. In addition to our land development code, we have our building codes. We've adopted the International Building Code. And this is primarily for safety, that construction is done in a safe manner and that a permit process is followed with plans that are reviewed ahead of time, approved, and then inspections during the construction process. Additionally, with the network of building and code professionals, there's additional technical resources that we can take advantage of. There's a lot of information out about fire smart communities, how communities can compile, how communities can build for homes that are on the edge of the forest area in ways that manage the landscaping and use materials that help to keep down embers from starting fires on houses during fire events. Another thing is that there's a technical appendix to the International Building Code that talks about straw home bale construction. And there's other alternative building materials that there's lots of information out. So we can make some of those things more available on our website and perhaps actually adopt some of them into code. Additionally, we have our capital improvements plan. And last year we adopted an update to this where we now are going to have a 3-year cycle where The community can give input into our list of capital improvements, and we'll evaluate those projects based on impacts to resources, including water availability will be an important thing to make sure that we review for. I want to link to our website. And let's see, does the website show up right now?
Yes.
Okay, so the first article on there is regarding our capital improvements program. And we have a web map that's been developed for us by our GIS section. And this web map is an interactive tool that allows comment on the different capital improvements. So each point here represents a capital improvement project. So this one here is for the Nikyaway subdivision. It has a little description of it and talks about time frame. And the time frame for this is very short. It's ground is likely to be broken this summer for it. So if we wanted to comment on this project, just click this. We have to fill in a name there for it to take the comments, and we can select a priority level, how we feel about this. We like the project, and then we could add some comments and submit them, and they're all tracked in an app that the Tribal Planning Office can view. So another project I'd like to highlight is down South Market Road. We have our pandemic preparedness building. And this will help us be ready for future events where emergency supplies and food are needed. And there's also well number 6 that's farther down here on South Market Road that probably Public Works and other folks talking today will be talking more about that. But that helps to create additional water supply for our community. So let's see, back to, whoops, I lost my presentation. There we are. We also are going through a process for the July grounds area of planning what that area can be used for. We have this preliminary July grounds master plan that was developed. JD did several meetings on this and has received input, and that's all been put into this preliminary master plan, which is really just a collection of ideas that will potentially become projects in the future as funding is found for them and as more details are planned around them. So we invite you to look at this. This is available as part of that article that's on the first page of the website. And so you can scroll into some of these areas and read about them, and you're welcome to submit comments through the July grounds point on the web map, or you can just email tpo@ctuir.org and submit detailed comments that way. Finally, I'd like to mention our hazard mitigation plan. This is something that the Public Works Department is very instrumental in, but also planning has been involved in the past. And it's very important that it's being kept up to date because it is required to be up to date for FEMA disaster assistance. And secondly, it's very important that we implement it after the strategies are come up with, that we have someone on point to help implement those strategies. So I would like to turn it back over to JD for, or maybe Danny's presentation is next. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think, do you want to, Colleen, do you want to go with Danny's presentation?
Yes, and I have it queued up here. So
okay.
Let me get that running. Share. So you're going to get some double vision here for a second. All right. Sound is important. Okay. Hang on. There's like an order of operations here that I need to, oh, there's the sound. All right. So please let me know if you can't hear anything. If Danny starts talking and you can't hear anything, give me a shout. Here goes.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Danny Schulte. I'm the transportation planner for the CTUIR. I've been in this role for the past year, and I've worked for the tribe for about 2.5 years now. Sorry I can't be there in person, but I really appreciate Colleen for making accommodations and letting me share some information by recorded video. So today I'm talking about transportation dimensions of climate change mitigation. My job is primarily wrapped up in roads and trails, which is not the most exciting topic, but it is how we all get around to all of the places that we actually want to go and care about and think about. CTUIR has been making significant investment in climate change mitigation in the built environment for decades. One of the most visible being the movement of the Government Services Center from the low-lying, flood-prone July Grounds campus to the new Nikyawi campus, which began over a decade ago. Kayak is also a really important achievement. In the 2001 Transportation System Plan, it was just a dream, and it's now an award-winning transit system that provides greater access than the vast majority of rural transit networks. So that is a really impressive achievement of the tribe generally and the folks that work really hard at Kayak to provide those services. But transportation accounts for the largest share of US greenhouse gas emissions. So doing our part to combat climate change includes finding ways to support people who would like to switch to non-polluting transportation modes. In our community, this might not be for all of their trips, since it is a very rural, spread out community for the most part, but we can create opportunities and support folks when those opportunities arise. One of the ways the tribe already does this is compact development surrounding the new Nikyawi campus. Initially, the campus movement was a trip generator, but as residential lots open up for development over the next year or two, more people will be close enough to walk to work, school, recreation, and services. The new development area includes space zoned for small businesses as well, which will further increase opportunities for services to be located within walking distance of tribal residences on a fairly small scale. So things like maybe a hair salon or, you know, a cafe or bodega, something like that. The tribe is also working on increasing walking and biking paths. In 2020, we won an ODOT Safe Routes to School grant award to complete the path from July Grounds to the Nikyawi Community School. So to bridge the gap where students might now walk along Highway 331 on the shoulder. This will open up opportunities for students particularly, but of course, because there's plenty of new buildings there, the NGC and Yellow Hawk as well, it will also create opportunities for other folks walking to get to their destination safely in an active mode. Looking ahead, there are a number of ways we can build climate resilient infrastructure. We can make sure that new roads, paths, and bridges are located in climate resilient locations, such as away from flood-prone areas. And this is already something that our code requires. But as we saw last year, the increasing severity and frequency of natural disasters will show us where we need to do better. Improving the climate resilience of existing roads and other transportation facilities will also be important. We can, use tools such as permeable pavement and swales in existing flood-prone areas, and try to move roads out of areas vulnerable to flooding where possible. Another way we can combat climate change is to keep mandatory minimum off-street parking low in new development areas. Homeowners can choose how many cars they want to make space for. And if they choose to reduce their vehicle space because they can walk to many of their destinations, planning isn't going to stop them. we can also continue to expand opportunities for walking, bicycling, horse riding, and other non-polluting transportation modes. This has been in the transportation system plan for at least 20 years now. But now the task is finding funding and prioritizing those efforts to make roads safer for non-car users or create separate safe facilities for them. And one important way to reduce emissions is to bring people close to where they need to go. And this means increasing tribal investment in dense urban or suburban type areas like the Mission Corps and the city of Pendleton. This reduces personal vehicle dependency and maybe a preferred living choice for some tribal members, perhaps who, enjoy living in Pendleton. And finally, we've considered things like a street tree policy for developed and developing neighborhoods to encourage planting native and climate resilient species that will make walking and biking safer and more pleasant by providing shade and a further bonus, carbon capture. So this is a good time to be thinking about these things. Over the next 2 years, we'll be updating the transportation system plan and asking the community how they envision their transportation needs to be changing over the next 20 years. Climate resilience will, of course, be central in those discussions. If you have any questions, my colleagues may be able to answer them in your live video, or you can shoot me an email at dannyschulte@ctuir.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Danny and Holly, for that really amazing information. It's really exciting that there's going to be some new planning efforts and moving old planning goals forward. JD, did you want to introduce our next speaker, or how do we want to do this?
Certainly. Thank you. And I think our third one is Samantha Matlock. She is our new Environmental Health and Safety Officer. She has a quick little presentation on the stuff she's working on. So go ahead, Sam.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
and we can see
great.
your slides.
Perfect. So I'm Samantha Matlock. I've been here since August, and I'm just going to do a brief overview on climate adaptation from an environmental health perspective. Okay, so as we all know, with climate change, we're going to have an increase in floods, increase in wildfires, increase in temperatures, which leads to droughts. Some of the solutions that we've already talked about is new infrastructure such as wells, the well number 6 project, and wastewater treatment using renewable energy. And protecting the resources we already have, such as well infrastructure, domestic wells, testing them for water quality and identifying high bacteria areas during emergencies and after, as well as creating a domestic well program or code that enforces the water quality standards for domestic wells. Also looking at septic infrastructure, making sure during, after floods, they're being assessed and maintained. And we're using hazard mitigation techniques such as risers for septic tanks in the future. Some of the work that I've been doing since August for septic systems, this is a septic system where the sewage was past the inlet, which means that it was infiltrated during the flood and could possibly lead to backups of the septic system. I always recommend take pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So because I was able to demonstrate flood areas and that our septic systems were in flood areas after the February flood with lots of pictures of the damage, we were able to assess approximately 55 homes with their septic tanks, pump their systems and assess for additional damage, and to see if there was any pooling of water on their drain field. Some of the things that we do during the floods are just giving out tips to homeowners, making sure that they know what to do with their wells, and not to drink the water directly after the flood if they haven't tested or treated with bleach solution. Now, in last April, over 100 homes were tested for total coliform and E. coli, which is bacteria, in their wells, and they were retested if they were positive and also treated with a bleach solution. This summer, I'm going to be retesting all of these homes for total coliform and E. coli, as well as nitrates, and mapping them with GIS to make sure we identify areas that may have high bacteria loads in the future in flood areas. I already touched on the fact that since the flood, we're doing water testing and additional water testing. However, this summer, with a hazard mitigation grant, you can see on the left in that picture is a septic riser. We plan to install 40 risers at homes. And so in the future, it will be easier to identify tanks that may have been full or damaged during a flood, and be able to better come up with a solution to make sure that they don't have sewage backing into their homes. We also this summer assessed 55 septic tanks. This included getting site plans for people's systems, identifying and locating their system, giving them a maintenance schedule information, contact information for the pumpers, as well as the environmental health officer if they had additional questions or concerns regarding their tanks. I also identified old systems that needed to be removed, such as metal tanks to prevent leaching into groundwater. Some of the things that I'll be doing in the future this summer with the hazard mitigation grant is to create videos of what to do before the flood, during a flood, or after the flood in regards to homeowners' septic tanks and wells. These videos will be available via social media or on our website to give more information to people to reach out during a flood or after an emergency. This is just one homeowner that we helped this summer and fall. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is a septic tank. When we showed up, it was completely full of sewage. They were having backup issues in the home. And you can see in the middle picture, the tank is less than 2 feet from the property. This is a very old tank. And no longer are we putting metal tanks in the ground due to leaching of metals. And so I'm currently working with this homeowner. We were able to identify what it was in the ground and to try to access Indian Health Services funds and remove this for the homeowner to prevent future issues in a next flood. Tribal Food Code. I also am the regulator for the Tribal Food Code for CTUIR. I regulate the FDA food code. There's several versions. The newest version is 2017. I perform semi-annual inspections on all restaurants, daycare, school kitchens, any temporary vendors, such as during the powwow or 4th of July. There's also a cottage food bill that allows me to do inspections for domestic kitchens if people are baking cookies or cupcakes, non-potentially hazardous foods at their homes to sell. I also give instructions to people how to get their food handlers cards online and where that training's available. I'm also available to do in-person food handlers training as well. Some of the future things that we're looking at for food sovereignty and in regards to climate change is possibly a commercial kitchen. The next steps for that would be somebody doing a feasibility study. There's several of these commercial kitchen examples in our area and in the Portland area. I've listed a few, such as Blue Mountain Station Road in Dayton and Mercado and the Red facility in Portland. Some of the things that I also am watching in regards to food sovereignty on the tribe is last year, House Bill 4206 was passed, which allows Oregon Department of Agriculture to regulate livestock slaughter and processing, which hasn't been done in the state of Oregon in decades. That did not come with a funding bill attached to it. So this year was introduced House Bill 2785 to establish programs to fund upgrades to establishments expected to operate for livestock slaughter. Some of the goals that we're currently working on that other people mentioned is well number 6 that's being implemented currently. Also the Nikiawe subdivision. Water sewer infrastructure will be installed for 50 residential lots and 12 commercial/residential lots. This will allow tribal members to move back to CTUIR ground from Pendleton and remove them from flood areas. As well as we're looking at putting in a wastewater treatment facility in the future that would allow us to be self-sufficient and reuse gray water to water lawns such as the Governance Center and the golf course. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available via email or my phone number. Email is samanthamatlock@ctuir.org. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. That was so great. That's a lot of new information that I didn't even know, really. I mean, I learned so much during all of this. So thank you so much for that area of expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I think we only have about 5 minutes left on our portion. Is that right, Colleen?
I believe so. Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Okay, great. And the only thing I just wanted to wrap up with is, you know, my staff has done an amazing job pulling that together. But one of the things I did want to kind of bring this all together on is the biggest impact to climate change, especially in decisions made about infrastructure, is actually personal choice. A couple of things I wanted to really highlight is just like the decision on lot size. Over the last 60 or 70 years, we've seen lot sizes get bigger and bigger, where people want, 50-foot lots, then they want 75-foot lots, and they want 100-foot lots. They just want bigger and bigger lots, and the implications of that is that it requires more and more land to be converted from green fields into housing projects. But even more importantly is, like, if you take a 50-foot lot, that requires 50 foot of concrete for sidewalks, it requires 50 feet of asphalt for roads, it requires 50 feet of pipe and fiber and copper and sewer lines, and it requires 50 feet. But if you double that to 100 foot, now suddenly you have twice all that. So your life cycle analysis for the carbon that's embodied within all that, so instead of having 100 feet or 50 feet of pipe, you now have 100 feet of pipe to still serve only one house, which requires twice the amount of petroleum pulled out of the ground. It requires twice the amount of copper it takes to be mined. It takes twice the amount of fiber optic to be created. It takes twice the amount of land that's converted. And so all these hundreds of millions of small choices that individuals make is actually what is the major fuel of climate change. Just choosing a 100-foot lot is doubling the amount of carbon that lot is taking to require to make. And then it also requires twice as much lawn mowing. It requires twice as much fertilizer on the ground. It requires twice as much everything. So I really want to make sure that everyone's really understanding their own personal choices have impacts on climate change. One other thing, an example that it'll bring up too, is also the connectivity between these things. And the story that I have is about, I had an employee tell me that they needed bigger parking lots out here at NGC. We needed bigger parking spaces because they drive a dually. And my first question was like, why do you need to drive a dually to the NGC to sit at a desk? That was my first question, but that didn't matter really much. But the conversation kind of went around. It's like, well, I need a dually for my work or my off hours work. I said, well, the parking lot's almost full. I said, well, let's make the parking lot bigger. And so, well, that's a lot of money. And so that's a lot of money just to make a parking lot bigger, just so you can drive a dually to work. And then interesting enough, just a few months later, that same individual had a conversation with them about getting rid of the mines up on the hill, like Bryant Mine and Padawa Mine and Grubbs Pit. Was that these are terrible on the landscape, and they tear up the soil and they tear up the rock and everything like that. And my first implication, the thing that occurred to me was that, just a few months ago, they were asking me to increase the parking lot size, and now they're asking me to get rid of the mines on the hill. And they didn't realize where the rock came from. Like the rock to make the parking lot bigger came from those mines on the mountains right here. Like that's literally where the rock comes from. And so it's really important for really people to understand that there's a connectivity of everything. If you want more parking lots, then those parking lots are coming out of the mountain right here in our backyard. If we want bigger homes and bigger lots, then that is woods coming out of the forest. It's land that's being converted from green fields to urban fields. If we want more pipes, if we want bigger lots, if we want more water, if we want all those things, then that's more oil and petroleum that's mined. That's more copper that's mined. That's more fertilizer that's being required to feed lawns. It's more of everything, and it's really, really important, I think, for people to really understand their personal choices having massive impacts on the climate change issues, because that all feeds up into the political process. It feeds up into the planning process. It feeds up into personal choice. And it's just really, really important for people to understand that they have a personal role in the climate change solutions. That's my little soapbox.
That is an awesome soapbox. Thank you. I think that, yeah, sometimes we can forget that the way that we live is not just us. We're magnified times, a million, a billion people. And so thank you for bringing that context. Do you have any kind of closing words that you want to kind of end your session with?
No, I think that's about it. I think there's, and it's just about personal choices, and I've got 8 or 9 other examples that I can go on about personal choices that we wrestle with here in planning. People want to choose things that are not necessarily in the best interest, long-term best interest for themselves or the community. And so, but I can go on and on for this for hours. So I'm more interested in getting questions, actually.
Did anyone have any kind of very specific clarifying questions for JD? Otherwise, we'll save the discussion for the end. We didn't have any come through in the chat, but if someone wants to field something really specific right now, that would be okay. Maybe we'll inspire discussion towards the end. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to having you stick around and talk with us a little bit. Thank you. I am going to share I messed up this morning and I didn't get a chance to share the presenters that we are actually going to have today. So I just wanted to really quickly show you that one if my computer will cooperate with me. There we go. So we have, of course, our planning office just talked, and so we're going to have discussions around housing. I don't know, Frank, I know you wanted to go last initially, but I see that you're here today, so I don't know if maybe you want to do your session or if we should go with housing.
I'm fine with going now if that helps, as long as I can get the PowerPoint up on the screen.
Yep, that would be great. So why don't you go ahead and give that share function a try. I know.
Okay. Do you see anything?
We see your smiling, lovely face,
okay,
but we don't see a presentation.
Okay, hold on.
There it is.
Okay, you see the presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'll go through it then. So I'm Frank Anderson. I'm the Public Works Director for the tribe here. And I chose 2 topics to share. And so the title is the Public Works Maintaining and Building Systems in a Changing World. Current issues and challenges. What you see there is a picture of the department for the most part. And so you see us in masks. And so what a challenging year and some change. But we are diverse in what we do. We move and we change our direction depending on what the need is. So that's our group. So what I wanted to talk about first is what we do. And so again, we provide service-oriented end product and respond to natural disasters and pandemics as one of our duties. The other thing we do is we supply drinking water to the community, businesses, and visitors. We ensure tribal roads and properties are in good working condition, and we respond to all emergencies affecting the above-mentioned assets. What you're going to see on the side, there's two pictures. And so the picture on top is of a flood event that's either happened in 2019 or 2020. We have events in both years. And so the reaction, one of the reactions that we have is to protect our facilities and respond to community members who ask for assistance in regards to some sandbagging. So what we do is we prepare for that every winter and spring. And so we have an area that in the lower picture that shows pallets of sandbags. And in the background, you'll see a green structure that is actually a sandbag machine. We found that to be very helpful because after filling about 100 of these sandbags, it'll wear someone out quick. And so this is, and thanks JD, this is under the transit bus barn. So the material is dry and ready to go for when we get called. So recent disaster type events and responses, flood stage of river and flood protection and sandbags, as I mentioned before. Also tribal road monitoring and protection. So our proactive movements are safety and monitoring of responders and volunteers, and document. The background on that is, as you see on the left picture, the Umatilla River, which is within the tribe here, most of the time is a very beautiful and a nice place, and the river flows very, very gently. But in certain springs, when there's large snow in the mountains and we have warm springs, the runoff is it makes for incredible runoff, and the river does rise. And when the river rises, it's going to erode, and it's going to create some difficulties for any structures around it. And that could be a house, could be a bridge, it could be any structure that we have. So one of the things that you'll see on the left is the river. And if you look in the background there, that is where it's running really fast and creating a lot of erosion. The picture on the right is a bridge that is not our bridge, it's a county bridge, but it's within the reservation here. And it buckled. It's starting to fail because of this erosion. So you can have incredible damage on structures and houses. Our response to that, again, is sandbags or evacuation assistance. But when we do sandbags, we have to watch things, because we can start to respond to a sandbag situation, start sandbagging, and the river will rise quickly, where we have to evacuate ourselves as well as those around us, because the sandbags that we could see, and within a half hour, you can't even see them. The river's risen that much. So the other thing is safety and monitoring of responders and volunteers. If you have these types of events, it's most effective if you have someone assigned to monitor who's coming with and loading up with sandbags, where they're going, and when they return. It's very important, safety. You don't want anybody hurt. So again, when you have this velocity of water going by, it's important to be safe. The term document, that's an after effect if you have damage and you choose to work with FEMA on cost recovery. The process for cost recovery is very detailed and requires a very good documentation to get reimbursed. So if you get in that situation, it is most important to have someone assigned to do these things specifically. So it's very helpful. The other subject we have is community resource management. Water is life. Our current community water system consists of 5 wells with an additional well 6 coming on board, hopefully later this summer. And so from those wells, we provide up to 1 million gallons a day of drinking water to the community for some purpose. And some of that is irrigation. we think that we're at a good point in production, but now we have, if you have water being consumed, it's going somewhere in the sewer system. And we don't have a sewer treatment plant, so our sewer system connects to our neighboring city's sewer treatment plant. So with that, we have a permit for allowable discharge to that treatment plant, and we have rates and fees which are from the city next to us. We're actually charged a little higher since we're outside their service area, and that cost is rising with the increase of rates and fees to the point where it's really a concern to whether it's even economical to do so anymore. So that's our growing pains. We have, as JD mentioned, there's plans for additional housing units, which is tribal housing units, which is a great project that we have, and there's more planned. But that takes water and sewer supplies and system ability. So we have limited supplies right now, not so much on the water side, but getting close. But the sewer side is where we have concerns. And so that kind of triggers our discussion about is it appropriate for us to consider our own wastewater treatment plant? Maybe. It depends on the type of treatment plant we were speaking of. The standard traditional treatment plant is a lagoon type treatment plant, which is the bottom left picture that you see on the screen. Those are mixers and aerators, and so what's that in big lagoons? So what that is doing is it's mixing so that the lagoons can separate the sewage in top and bottom. But along with that comes with a pretty aggressive smell. And so, but I think we're in a position where the technology is catching up to us. So they now have other types of treatment plants. So our internal benefit is, how do we choose what's right for us? Do we just want a lagoon type treatment plant that we treat and then we just discharge to the river, or do we want something where we can get another benefit out of it? And so what is that? So that's typically, with technology, you can now have systems that will treat the sewage and treat it to a level, and so you can reuse it. And we have a lot of turf that needs to be irrigated. So really, we're looking at a system that we could reuse and get more than one benefit from it. The additional benefit from that is that we can actually have tribal members train it and operate that plant. So there is multiple benefits for reuse. And so the top right picture is a particular type of reuse treatment where it's like cargo containers or Lego system, if you would. And so you have a good return of irrigation water, and you have a small amount of solids that you can apply to certain ag farms, and then you have some that you dispose of, which is very little. So anyway, technology is to benefit on this. So, but it is an extra cost. But I think if we look at the overall picture of this, is that we're kind of in a way we're kind of prisoners of a neighboring system's cost rates and fees. And so we feel it's important for us to look at this and see if we can neutralize that cost and give more benefit to the community for that. And what that does is it also allows, if we reuse the water for irrigation, it allows us to take that drinking water that we were irrigating with and now use it for any additional housing units that we want to build or any other community buildings. So in a way, it really makes sense. Again, it's about cost, certainly, but I think overall the multiple benefits gives it something to really look at closely. And I think that's the way to go for this tribe. And so I think that in the future, I think there's going to be an aggressive push for this in my field, at least. And so that's my opinion. And I think it's a great benefit to the community. And so, again, that's tribal community advancements. It's taking care of Mother Earth. We reuse. It's important to reuse to make a maximum benefit out of any resource that we have. we have such we have aquifers here that we pull from water from, and the water I've worked at a lot of places, and the water here is I call it a sweet water. It's really good quality water, and we chlorinate it because we have to, but it's just really good quality water. So those are the two items I wanted to mention. And again, it says reach for the stars. I think we should look at far-reaching possibilities that will benefit the community, the tribal community. So that's my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions now or later.
Thanks, Frank. I love the idea of reaching for the stars. One thing about doing climate change planning is we're kind of forced to confront the fact that the way things have been done have not been really the correct way of doing things in recent years. And so this is an opportunity for us to look at those things that we considered far out of our reach and say, maybe we need to make this happen. So I appreciate that. Do we have any really specific questions for Frank before we move on to our next presenter? We have some great discussions in the chat that I want to leave for a little bit more of a space for us to explore them. But if we have any specific questions about the work of Public Works and the water treatment plant specifically, now is the time to ask. Unless somebody jumps on, I think we will. Thank you so much, Frank. That was really great information, and I'm really excited for the future and the great work that your team is doing. They keep us all safe, and maintaining our public infrastructure is really, really essential. Thank you for all the great things that you do. If I could get you to stop sharing, we're gonna turn to the place where we've all been spending a lot more of our time this past year, our homes and houses. And we have two really amazing presenters with our CTUIR housing department. And so I will let them introduce themselves. So Tanner, Michael, and Kimberly Hughes, if you want to go ahead and take it away, you are up. Tanner, we can see your slides. Oh, they went away again.
Well, you could see it. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for having us here this afternoon. My name is Tanner Michael with the CTUIR Housing Department, and I am the maintenance manager. Also with us from the Housing Department is Kimberly Hughes, the Resident Service Coordinator / Home Inspector. So I will start the slideshow here. So first we have the housing mission statement, is to provide quality community housing services and empower self-sufficient living for future generations, achieve the maximum protection of resources identified in the Treaty of 1855, to protect newly acquired lands wherein the tribe has vested interest, to protect the land of all citizens and residents of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, protect human life, water, land, air, and wildlife by expressing professional skills and abilities in the protection of the resources of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. A couple of the goals that we have in housing and maintenance is maintain, modernize, and rehabilitate existing rental units. And currently we have 232 homes that we manage. We assist in the development of new quality affordable housing, which is a collaboration of multiple different departments within CTUIR. Today, I've picked 3 of the top issues we're faced with the environmental and climate current issues with housing. The first one here being the flooding, the groundwater in the residential communities, air quality, with the wildfires throughout the Northwest, population growth, and the availability of homes on CTUIR. Just to start it off with in housing, we have checks and balances. We have environmental review submitted yearly to the funding agency, which is HUD and HOSDA. The environmental review is a public document that encompasses all the aspects of environmental impacts with maintenance activities. It's about a 75-page document, and it also includes maps. I don't have one to present, but it includes the maps of the area, where the homes are located, and any effects that could be possible. So for the highlights and maintenance activities that we take into consideration during rehabilitation of the residential homes, the emissions from the home, which includes the HVAC or the heating and cooling system, the water heater, and also the wood fireplaces. The water usage in homes and landscapes, the gallons per minute fixtures that are being installed in the homes, and the green leaf procurement that comes with that as far as energy efficiency, all Energy Star appliances, high efficiency appliances, and fixtures. The first one that we chose was the flooding and groundwater. So like Frank explained on the previous presentation, the yearly flooding and groundwater in residential communities, the climate change has impacted our area. We've never had this amount of flooding in our area in the last, decade, especially from last February's flood, which we're still working on those as we speak with local entities and FEMA. Within our communities, the problems that it has caused is deterioration of the foundations, infiltration of the heating system, which causes abundance of moisture in the homes. The solutions that we've came up with, clearing of vegetation for flow in local streams, creeks, and tributaries. There's an ongoing collaboration with Water Resources and the Public Works Department and Housing with the clearing of the Spring Creek that is just south of our residential area that is in jeopardy here. In that same residential areas, we've been removing all of the HVAC ductwork that was in the foundations, and we're installing them in the ag space to alleviate that moisture coming into the homes. We're installing high efficiency exhaust fans in the homes, and so anytime a home is rehabilitated or at move out, it gets an upgraded exhaust fan in the bathroom, and there's been a couple homes that have even had exhaust fans placed in the central living areas like the living room. Another thing that we try to keep up on is lawns care and groundkeeping, and keep the vegetation low to help with evaporation and eliminate some of that groundwater that we see. The next one we chose was air quality. So with our yearly wildfires throughout the Northwest, has a direct impact for quality of air in the home and offices, as we all know, within CTUIR. The fires last summer, the fire in Western Oregon surrounding the Pendleton area, we struggled for weeks with our HVAC systems, and it was in all of our buildings. It wasn't just the homes, it was in all of our offices as well. Some of the solutions that we had is we were providing upgraded air filters for the homes, and we were sealing any air leaks at doorways, windows, anything that presented itself during that time. Population growth. So the availability of homes within housing, we have 140 income-based units through HUD and HOSDA. We have 58 tax credit units through the Oregon Housing Community Service. And we have 34 market rate units. Just a background, we've got what I refer to as the 12-2 project, which is down here. It's the most western community that we have here, and it was the oldest. It was built in 1973. It consists of 50 units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and 4 bedroom units. We've got the 12-6 projects, which is the white brick homes. They were built in 1981. There's 50 units there as well. We had Mission Creek developed in 1998. There's 98 units that we manage there. Huckleberry Street, which was developed in 2017, is 4 duplexes for a total of 8 units. In 2013, formerly known as URHA, became a department under the tribe's umbrella. With that, we received 13 rental homes, including the Lucky 7 trailer park, which had 28 homes at the time. Currently, that Lucky 7 area is under construction, replacing very old homes, and the new development will consist of 18 very high efficient homes. The problems that we're faced with population growth is the limited availability. The applicant goes on the waiting list sometimes for months to years. The solutions, CTUIR is evaluating building affordable homes, which is ongoing, and we have multiple different projects on the radar right now. CTUIR developing infrastructure for future homeowners, and with the last couple presentations, as you heard from Planning Department, that is ongoing and underway. And that is the end of this presentation. Any questions? Thank you. And my contact information is on there.
Thank you, Tanner. That was great. I know that this past year has been a lot of lessons, I think, in a lot of different ways. I know that my own home, I learned a lot of things about it during the smoke event, mostly that I learned how drafty it is. And how porous it is really to the outside environment. And so it's really great that you guys are taking that on and making sure the people who live in those houses are, living in the best conditions possible. Thank you for you and your crew and all of your work, and for Kim, and I know that she does amazing work also. Does anyone have any specific questions for Tanner?
Pauline?
Yes.
Hey, this is Kim. I'm sorry, my phone got muted and I finally got it off. I just wanted to add to the population growth on that, elaborate just a little bit more, especially with how hard 2020 hit us. We ended up with a lot of tribal members wanting to come home because of being so far away from resources. And with the limited amount of units that we have, housing has become kind of an issue. We do have occupation limits to the units. So when family members do try to come home with the programs, we can exceed those occupation limits. So our waiting list did grow a lot in 2020 for those reasons. And our inventory hasn't really gone up. And so now with the new development, I mean, it's such a great need for the people that are coming back home. The other issue, or it's not even an issue, it's actually really good, is that we have the majority of program homes. And so with those program homes comes income limits and other requirements. And as a growing tribe, we have people that are succeeding more in employment. And the homes that we currently have the majority of aren't made for the higher income people. So our inventory for people that are in those kind of positions is also kind of limited.
We had a request to clarify what you mean by occupation limits in those houses.
So HUD and Fair Housing actually has like how many people can occupy a unit based on how many bedrooms there are. And Fair Housing goes by 2 people per bedroom plus 1 extra. So if it is a 2-bedroom unit, then the occupation can only go up to 5. So if we have family members that are currently living there and there's 4, and they want to move 2 of their family members home, we have to try to help them get on the waiting list or do something different, because as a tenant, they are over occupying that home. And it becomes an unhealthy living condition as far as, crowded situations. The homes are only built for a certain amount of people, so then you're overusing the infrastructure inside the home. So it's just kind of, we do have population growth within our families, and we work with them to try to move them to a unit that's more suitable. But again, they have to wait for a unit that comes open.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's something that I didn't even think about with the pandemic, with people moving home and then not, those living situations not being able to accommodate that influx. It's great that you're working with people to address that. And I know housing is an issue for everyone, not just on the reservation, not just in Pendleton, but for everyone right now. Thank you for the excellent work that you're doing. I was wondering if you had a couple thoughts to close out your session with.
No, I'm glad that we're starting a development again. I mean, there was that, like Tanner pointed out, the differences in the building years. We kind of went stagnant there for a little while, and then in '97 picked up again, and then 2015. So I'm glad that we're on the move again as far as bringing in more homes, energy efficient and, cost affordable.
Yeah, me too. You did have one more question before I let you go. How many people are on the waiting list, and how long does it take for a family to get into housing?
That's actually a big question. So our waiting list varies, and it can vary anywhere between like 10 to 20 people. Just depends on how they want to stay on there. We have, because we have Native American funds that come in, we do have what we call preference points. So depending on who applies, depends on where they go on the waiting list. So when somebody applies, it can honestly be within a few months to actually a few years, because an elder of a CTUIR would be a higher preference than an other tribal member. And so it fluctuates, and as units become available, then we offer from the top of the list down. And some people, like I said, can stay on the list for years. Some people only a few months.
Thank you. That's a complicated process, and I know that housing is a great need. So it's wonderful what you're doing, and I know that it's never enough. It seems like some of the work that we do is never going to be enough, but it's great that you're carrying it on. So thank you so much. So we are coming towards the end of our presenters. Ashley Picard wanted to be here today, but she had kind of a last minute appointment. And so we have a pre-recorded video of hers, and then I'm going to be able to piggyback off of that and share some things about waste and being better for our garbage. I think that if you know me and know one thing about me, it's that I love garbage. And so I am really excited to have this last session talking about waste management. And so we're going to have Ashley's video play, and then I'm going to share some news or some things that are happening around this area that we could think about incorporating into the tribal community as well. So give me just a moment and let me see if I can make that video happen. So again, please shout at me if you can't hear anything. Here we go.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Ashley Picard, and I am the operations manager for the Tribal Transfer Station. I came up here about 9 years ago. A little bit of history on our program. The transfer station opened in 2001 after closing the tribal dump. Our solid waste is transferred to Finley Buttes landfill in Boardman, Oregon. And we provide all of the solid waste and recycling collection service within the reservation boundaries, which includes over 900 residential customers and approximately 35 commercial accounts that are serviced weekly. We are a relatively smaller program consisting of only 6 staff. Some acceptable recyclable materials here at the transfer station include scrap metal, aluminum, tin cans, which we ask that the labels be removed on those and them to be rinsed out, corrugated cardboard, and we ask that the boxes be flattened and contain no waxy surfaces, styrofoam, or plastics. Office paper, which includes white or pastel colored paper, envelopes, junk mail, file folders, and manila envelopes. Please remove sticky notes. Mixed paper, which includes newspaper, magazines, and phone books. Please have no string, twine, or other banding to hold this together. And then another common misconception that recyclers have is that office paper can be mixed in with the mixed paper. However, that is not true. Electronic waste, which includes computers, monitors, televisions, etc. Car and industrial batteries. Appliances, including washers, dryers, refrigerators, freezers, etc. And there's a small fee applied for this. Motor oil, and we ask that this be placed in plastic jugs with a lid containing no other liquids. There is a small fee applied for this as well. Tires, including car, truck, and tractor tires, there is a fee applied to this as well. Some tips on how to be a better recycler. Reduce and reuse first. Bring reusable bags for shopping. Consider buying used or previously owned. Look for products that use less packaging. Instead of throwing away unwanted clothes, furniture, electronics, or otherwise perfectly working conditioned materials, donate them instead. Avoid purchasing single-use plastics. And then recycle. Place recycling containers next to waste receptacles. This increases the likelihood of you to actually recycle. Follow the rules. Clean cans, remove labels, flatten boxes. Don't contaminate the other recyclable materials with garbage. And then reduce and reuse first, recycle last. Future goals. A major future goal that I have for our program would be to start a composting program. A few barriers that are in place for us would be staffing needs, land, and specific equipment. We have inherited a wood chipper from the DNR program, which is not totally functional at the moment, but once we get that up and running better, I would like to start wood chipping the trees and natural debris that comes through that is clean wood, of course, and then be able to provide that to our community, whether it be the community garden or the native plant nursery or just locals. I would love to be able to answer some questions for you all. However, this is a pre-recorded presentation. So my contact information will be included at the end of this. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to contact me there. Thank you.
So thank you, Ashley, for being there. I am really, really glad that the tribe has its the Tribal Environmental Recovery Program and facility. It really is actually a big compliment for the tribe to be able to do its own waste management. I know that when a couple of years ago, when the Chinese government stopped accepting plastic as a recycled material, it really forced everyone to think differently about their waste since we couldn't recycle plastic. Fun fact, now we know actually that plastic was never recyclable, that it actually was going into incinerators in China, which was contributing to a lot of China's poor air quality. And so it was actually a really great thing for their communities and their people to say that they were no longer going to be the dumping ground for the world. But it did then force the world to confront the way that we, manage our materials. And so I am thankful that I'm going to piggyback a little bit on Ashley's time to talk about some other things that are happening and some other ways that we can rethink our waste. And so I'm hoping that you can see a slide here. I'd love Aaron to let me know that he's able to see a slide, PowerPoint slide.
Looks good, Colleen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some things that are happening. So again, I'm a deep lover of garbage. I know that sounds really weird, but it really is an interesting examination of our society, the things that we throw away. And the fact that we have waste, it to begin with, really flies in the face of, I think, a lot of the ways that we would want to manage the world, because having waste implies that there is something left over, and nature doesn't leave anything left over. It merely repurposes things. And so the waste that our society generates tells a lot about us and shows us a lot about what we can improve on. And so waste, especially when we talk about climate change, really has an important role to play, because so much of the garbage that is generated contributes directly to the warming of our climate. So I have a couple charts here that show a breakdown of the one here on the top right shows the 2008 methane emissions in the United States, so just one country alone. We see that landfills actually make up 17% of the methane that's emitted. And methane is important because it is an extremely potent greenhouse gas. Carbon dioxide gets a lot of attention because it's the one that gets put off most frequently, but methane is is 84 times as potent as carbon dioxide in trapping heat in our atmosphere. And so wherever we can reduce generation of methane would be really a great chunk out of the carbon that is emitted into the atmosphere. And so where does that methane come from with the landfills? Methane is emitted when organic material decomposes without oxygen. And so if you were to just throw like a apple core out into the forest, it's going to decompose with that oxygen around it, and it's going to create carbon dioxide in a way that's really natural and actually really helpful for the cycling of nutrients. But when you put that apple core under piles and piles of plastic and clothing and all of the other things that we throw away, it doesn't have oxygen to break down. And so during that decomposition process, instead it creates methane. And then that methane is released into the environment as it kind of seeps up out of the landfills. And so this chart down here to the slight left of the other one shows a 2013 global estimate of what goes into landfills. And so we see roughly 62% of materials globally that ends up in landfills is organic material. It's that paper, it's the food waste, it's yard trimmings, and it's wood. And so this is really a great opportunity for us to be more conscious about the things that we throw away and the way that that contributes then to our climate crisis. So with that in mind, there are a couple of really great things happening in our corner of the world that I just really wanted to highlight because it's something that I've kind of thought of could be part of the Climate Adaptation Plan. The city of Portland has a master recycler program. So this is a really hands-on learning experience when, non-pandemic times, where, volunteers get to learn about what is and isn't recyclable. Ashley did a really good job of taking us through kind of that specific list of things that are recyclable, but I always find myself having questions about what is truly recyclable. I know that like Tetra Packs, those wax cardboard packs used to be recyclable and now no longer are, but that information is not readily available and there isn't really a central location we can go to ask some of these questions. And so this Master Recycler program would be a really great opportunity to train people for answering those questions or knowing the best route for some of those materials. Oregon State University has a Recycling 101 class. It's a virtual class and it's offered on demand. And I think it's approximately 15 hours of coursework, and there are actually educational credits available too. So if you're looking for some continuing education, that might be a good opportunity. And so that course really talks you through kind of those nuts and bolts of where we're losing opportunities to reclaim some of these materials. And so this is something that I thought could be a really great community effort, is to engage in one of these classes in kind of a communal learning experience. We also In Clark County, Washington, there is a master composter program. Compost, as Ashley talked about in her video, would be a really great way of reclaiming a lot of those yard trimmings, a lot of the tree debris, a lot of the food waste that we generate that we've seen goes to contributing to methane production. And so to learn best and better ways of composting would be a way of recapturing some of that at a home level, but then also, you know, there's ways to scale this up into a community level program like Ashley was talking about. I know from my personal endeavors that I love pallets, wood pallets. I pick pallets up behind the EO. Please don't tell them that I do that. And I think that Wild Horse, also behind Wild Horse, you can get pallets, wood pallets. And so I love to do little rinky-dink construction projects with my pallets, and mine look terrible, but I also wanted to show some examples of ones that don't look terrible. There is a little bit of a effort into taking these apart and putting them back together again, but I find it kind of fun. I got like a rubber mallet that I get to hit a crowbar with. It's a little bit of an anger, stress relief therapy for me. And so I recommend anyone that is interested in that, maybe just give it a try. There is a caveat though. I want to make sure that people know that not all pallets are made the same. There are some pallets that have really harmful chemicals in them, so you shouldn't be using those or burning them. Please do not also burn them. And so this is a quick little chart that shows the pallets are stamped with different information that tells you kind of what's been done to them. And so we see things like methyl bromide, they'll be stamped with an MB. Please do not use those for anything. Please do not burn them. And then colored pallets, anything that's a blue pallet or a red pallet, please do not use those. Please do not burn them. And then the last thing I wanted to really highlight was the Rebuilding Center in Portland. This is a really great center where they take in material that can be salvaged and they do a little bit of work with it. The picture down here on the left is a gentleman who's actually removing staples from like a tack board so that it can be reused and repurposed. And so this facility does a really great job of inventorying those materials and making them available and reselling them. They also have online classes, which they cost a little bit of money, but they give you a training course on different things that you can do to reuse these. So there's one coming up that I think I'm going to sign up for that's refinishing floors and surfaces. And so that's like, how do you, make a wood surface that looks not so optimal look better? And there are a bunch of other different kinds of classes that they offer. And so these are just some thoughts that I wanted to kind of throw out there as part of this, that we have some amazing opportunities here in the future to get to do some of these things. And I know that there are grant programs out there to fund some of these, but it's just coming together and making them happen. And so I think that the future is really bright, and I'm really excited for the potential to recapture some of these materials. So with that, I am going to throw up the contact list because we've had a couple of people want to just show that. But I think that this is a good time now to have our discussion. Oops, there we go. So I'm hoping, oh, can't see anything. Is the screen sharing? What can you see? So if everyone could turn your cameras on if you want, I think that we have some questions here in the chat that I would love to pose to everyone. We have, so Lisa wants to know if, let's see, where was that question? Let's see. Lisa says, I am on the Tribal Water Commission and have reached out to JD regarding attending and updating us on the capital improvements plan and the status of a wastewater treatment facility and the rescue of water. It sounds like Samantha Matlock is also on this issue, and Lisa would appreciate your attendance at a future Tribal Water Commission meeting to discuss what you're seeing. So that sounds like something maybe in the future. Lisa also goes on to say, you mentioned no more metal septic tanks, which brings to mind the status of the Williams pipeline in the floodplain and underground near the projects. Are they safe? I understand one of 3 of the pipelines is 70 years old. As you think of earthquakes in the area, are those pipelines safe? And what is the outreach to community members living on or near the pipelines, as Lisa is one of them?
JD, would you like to speak on the pipelines?
Certainly. The pipelines, I know they're inspected often, like constantly, all the time. They'll drain them and depressurize them, and they're called pig launchers. They're these little robots that actually run the length of the pipe, and they look for anomalies within the pipe, and they go in and fix those. So I would say the pipes are incredibly safe. However, like at the website, and we'll dig it out. A while ago, when they were doing some major repairs, there was some outreach, and it was in the CUJ, I believe, about like online safety courses considering the pipes. And I was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And so we can dig out some of that information and get that reposted. And I believe we also had some stuff out here in our foyer. We have an information sheet outside the planning office that has, well and septic health issues, information on bed bugs and other vermin, solid waste. And so we have that kind of stuff there. But, it's been difficult getting in and out of the building. So we can work to make that more available online as well.
And also on the wastewater treatment facility, that's a project that's going to be in progress between planning and public works. And when more information is available, I'm sure either Frank or JD or I would be more than willing to present, what information we're looking at and the options that are available. So, yeah, thank you.
Do you want to, the other thing about the metal tanks is that, those are metal septic tanks. And so it's very, very different having septics or sewage sitting in a metal tank versus having even like petroleum or anything like that moving from a metal pipe. Sewage is incredibly corrosive. And that's what the issue is that it's actually corroding those old tanks, and then the sewage is seeping directly into the groundwater. So that's more the concern on that.
Yeah, exactly. And Indian Health Services has a program, and they've been over, as we discover them more on tribal ground, we are trying to remove them to prevent the leaching of the metals into the groundwater.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question. Dara wanted to know if there is a plan for possible small plots of land for people to build on that aren't necessarily located in a housing development type layout. While climate change and environmental concerns are very important, it's also important to remember that for someone who has lived their whole life in one of the projects, the dream of owning their own property and home with land to spare is something to consider. Mm-hmm. And is there a plan to manage non-tribal members who build out here and to adhere to these environmental, less carbon footprints ideas that JD is talking about?
A couple of things is the scattered site projects. Let me step back. The new Nikiawe development project they'll be on 99-year leases, and so those will be ownership. So you build and own that lot for the term of the lease for 99 years, and then you can actually build your own home on that. For scattered sites, which are like off the grid or like off the water and off the water systems, it's very difficult because because obviously we want to help people do that, and the land development code allows that. The difficulty on doing those things is often the fractionation of homes. Doing a PUD on a piece of property is actually relatively easy. The hard part of that is getting all the landowners to sign off on that and to agree to it. So the 3 things that have to occur is you have to get all the landowners to agree. You do the survey and subdivide it into individual pieces, and then you submit it to the LPPC for consideration. It's actually a relatively easy process, but the hardest part is getting all the landowners to agree to it. And then the other side of it too is that it's important for these very large scale. This is a choice. Living out on your own 20 acres or 40 acres out in the countryside is a choice. Some people have farming interests, and they have horses, and they have all these other things that they need, and that's great. But if it's just purely a choice, then we really have to think holistically about what that choice is, because that's more roads, that's pipe, that's more fiber, that's water lines, that's land conversion from agriculture or naturalized areas into land that's now housing a home. there's all these embodied costs about having all these scattered sites. And so while the land code allows for it and we help people through that process, but I do always want people to understand that that's a choice. And it's often a want and not necessarily a need. And the fundamental purpose of the government is to provide needs and not necessarily provide wants. So it's where we're kind of at on that. As for the other residents or non-Indians who own and live on houses here on the reservation, we do have fee lands and holdings within the reservation, and they are subject to the Land Development Code.
And can I just add one little thing on the scattered site development, JD? All tribal members, if you don't know, you do have a allocation per tribal member through Indian Health Services for well and septic infrastructure. So if you are planning on building in the future, that's a program that I help oversee in conjunction with Indian Health Services. And it's a great program to be able to pay for some of the infrastructure cost to the tribal member.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question from Lisa that, Tanner, I know you answered this in the chat, but I would love if we could talk through it also a little bit. So Lisa asks, what is the backup energy source if the grids fail and wood stoves are no longer available? She's just thinking about what we saw in Texas, and if there are no backups, is there a recommendation that we invest in generators? Tanner, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you said?
Well, we have been meeting internally about that, those issues that are rising this current time. Nothing that I can really divulge publicly, but JD, if you have something to say on that.
So some of the issues that the Texas issue is a very specific issue because the Texas grid system is separate from the rest of the Eastern and Western exchange system. So they are not actually tied into the rest of the country. And so nobody else was able to help them. If they were actually tied into the rest of the system, the rest of the country could have actually helped cover and help correct that issue. We are tied into the Western exchange system, which is like all the Western states, I think from Missouri east or west. Perhaps Colorado. And so, we have Bonneville Power as well as, not Bonneville, sorry. We have Umatilla Electric as well as Pacific Power. And there are ways for those to actually kind of help modulate each other, especially when where their systems cross. The ultimate issue, though, also is making sure we have energy security. As most people live out here know, that we're kind of at the end of the line for both energy on Pacific Power and Umatilla Electric. And so we often get that flickering, and the powers will flicker a little bit, and lights will flicker, and it used to be much more common. You don't see it much anymore, but they are trying to stabilize that. And so we have another route that's coming in. So most of the power comes up the river and then goes all to the rest of the reservation. But then they did the back channel that's coming out across Tutuwilla and then connecting that way to create a loop so that doesn't so it's more stable. Over time, we hope to become more energy independent through energy generation, through solar panels and potentially even geothermal. There's still some studies going forward on that. We're literally in the process of negotiating a contract to do an energy strategy plan, and we have a consultant lined up for that, and we're working on that through ESP, and that will do a number of things. It'll have short-term objectives such as exchanging for LED lights, another conservation type things that are very immediate and short-term solutions we can get. Midterm, which is kind of energy or systems improvement, and then another one is energy generation. And so there's like these kind of short and long-term goals within energy. And so there's a public input process that will be involved with that over the next, I believe, 7 or 8 months. And literally, we're just meeting about that now to get that contract finalized with the energy consultant. So it'll be coming out in probably the next few weeks.
That's great. Yeah, and I know that we will have our climate and energy conversation on April 2nd. And so those gentlemen over at the Domes and everybody working on that project will have a chance to share about that. And so we get to ask them some of these questions also, and hopefully you'll be a little bit further along in that process too. I want to open it up to the floor. Does anyone have anything that they've heard today that they want to talk more about, or anything that they've been kind of grinding an axe about that they want to have this opportunity to talk about? Please.
Hi, sorry, I'm not actually in the chat. I don't know why I can't participate there. I did have a question regarding the recycling. I remember living down in the projects and having, I lived in Portland previously, where you get your garbage bin and there's a glass and then there's another recycling bin, which I feel promotes separation at home. I think it's easy to just cram everything into one bin and have it go away. I live in Pendleton right now, and that's currently the situation here. So you actually have to go out of your way, go to the transfer station, recycle your products. Are there any kind of plans to maybe bring that, something like that on board to incorporate with the garbage disposal program that we currently have?
That is an excellent question. I think I don't know if Ashley was able to get on the line here on the phone, and so if she is, I want to give her a second to answer that. But I also have some knowledge from, so let me just give Ashley a chance to. All right, I think that she might be in her appointment. So I can't speak to future plans. That is something that definitely we should check in with Ashley about. I know that when, again, the Chinese government stopped accepting plastics, I was really curious about more, I wanted to know more about the process. And so I did go to our Pendleton Sanitary Service, is the company that manages our waste. They have a municipal contract to do that, and they also work with TURF to accept that waste, as well as kind of the end producer, or the end person that works with that. And so what they had said was, when you have kind of that single stream recycling where you can just put everything into one container and then it goes away, that's actually, that has to be sent to a larger municipality. So a lot of the waste, the recycling in Walla Walla and in La Grande, they have that single stream recycling. And so that actually gets collected there and trucked to Portland, where they have this massive facility that does all of this sorting. Whereas here, our Pendleton Sanitary Service actually does all of that sorting and all of that processing and packaging itself. And it's able to do that because of the separation. There's a thing in waste management known as contamination, and contamination is the amount of like plastic in your paper or paper in your plastic. And so companies have to maintain a certain standard of contamination, like below that standard, to continue to operate themselves. And so what happened in places like Walla Walla and La Grande is that their local municipal waste management companies were exceeding that contamination rate, so that they then had to truck this to Portland because that local processing plant was not functioning properly. And so being able to pre-sort your recycling is actually a really big badge of honor for a lot of places that do their own waste management. And so that doesn't speak directly to the bin question, but I think that could be really helpful. But it actually is really a great thing that we have to separate our own materials, because it means that our local company is doing such a good job of keeping contamination rates low. I don't know if maybe Sam has any kind of additional information.
No, I don't have any additional information on that subject yet.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question. We can follow up with Ashley in a little bit.
And
I see.
One quick note on that too is just also getting back to personal choice. Is I know, you know, when I first moved down here in 2014, that was right when the city of Seattle was. I moved from Seattle. And it's right when the city of Seattle was converting from, or outlawing plastic bags and a lot of the styrofoam. And so I presented it, I had a conversation with the board at the time, and they said, well, why do we care that's Seattle? And the reason why we should care is because about 70 train loads of garbage leaves Seattle every day and goes to Arlington, Oregon. That's where city of Seattle garbage goes to, is Arlington, which feeds right into the Columbia River, and that's why we care whether or not city of Seattle is producing garbage for that location. And just when the city of Seattle got rid of I think that it was their plastic bags and their styrofoams. They reduced those number of train cars by like 10%. So they went like per day was the amount of garbage that they reduced just by outlying the plastic bags and the styrofoam. So I mean, these are personal choices that people just kind of have to get on board with, and so it just cracks me up that that we still have plastic bags. You can still get a plastic bag at Mission Market. That just drives me bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. Go, Frank.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. It's probably been said already, but the recycling process, there are strict rules on what can be recycled, how clean it must be. If it's not clean, if there's certain things on it, it's not recycled. So there are restrictions on that, and so it takes a lot of effort on the front end to make sure that those are ready for recycle too from the consumers.
Absolutely, we all have a role to play. Moving on, Sefa, I see your hand up. Would you like to mute yourself and ask your question, please, or your discussion item?
I don't know who my question is going to go to, but I have a question about the plan for land management for landowners, because I cruise our reservation a lot, and I see certain land plots that have a lot of, say, vehicles or garbage on them that are right in the floodplain. And they sit in the water every year when the water comes through. And I wonder if there's any plan to enforce cleanup on these kind of properties.
I'll start and Sam can jump in. So those type of issues are solid waste issues that are enforced by the Environmental Health and Safety Officer and through the position. What we currently do is, well, this last year has been really difficult because some of our court cases to help clean houses up got held up because of COVID and a bunch of other things going on with civil actions at the court. In the past, over the last few years, there's a couple issues with this. One is hoarding and having large amounts of garbage and stuff. There's some embodied like cultural trauma that is the root of that. And so we don't necessarily want to punish people for having situational issues or being like trying to survive kind of thing. The other side of it though too is we also need to protect the river, we need to protect the climate, and we need to protect neighbors. And so these other jurisdictions are very, very aggressive on this. Like if you get a 30-day notice, and if it's not cleaned up, then you get a fine, and if you don't pay the fine, then you go to jail. I mean, 90 days you're in jail for having garbage. And we go a little bit slower about this when we start engaging with individuals with these really severe and complex solid waste issues. And it's often tied to other things. There's oftentimes child abuse or child neglect involved with that. There's often drug use involved with that. There's failed septic systems or failed wells. There's all kinds of these other issues. And so we partner with Yellowhawk on behavioral health and DCFS and Child and Family Services, and with housing if it's on a housing project. And so our process takes a lot longer because we are also kind of worrying about the individual that we're dealing with, or the families that we're dealing with. So we've gone back and forth on how aggressive we become on it. And unfortunately, in the last few years or many years, we've been kind of on the tattletale system. So we really only kind of go investigate when somebody makes a report of it and it's getting kind of serious. We've kind of wanted to move into more of an active, once a week we have, doing code enforcement. City of Pendleton has code enforcement. They have a car that drives around once a week, and if you have too many weeds, if you have too much garbage, if you have broken windows, all kinds of things can be enforced through code enforcement, and you get a citation just right there. And we don't want to be punishing people for having a situation in their life. We want to help people get through that situation. But it seems to be becoming more and more of a problem as more and more people are moving to the reservation.
And my concern is just for, we have fresh water is going to become a problem in the future. Right. And when we have properties, and these are within reservation boundaries, that have hordes of garbage, and I've watched them literally sit in the river year after year and nothing's being done about it. And these are washing chemicals down into the river, and I don't see anything being done about it. So that was just my concern.
So I can piggyback on what JD is saying and respond to you. I absolutely agree. It is a concern for me, for other tribal members, for planning. The contamination of the water systems, from either leaky vehicles or chemicals. But I would just encourage everybody to, I'm one person, and so I am the environmental health officer and that team. We have a form, it's available outside the office. I know this year's been difficult, or by email or by phone, to let us know the issues that you're seeing, because we can't address them and work with the homeowner or the person involved if we don't know about them. And so all the concerns that I take in complaints daily, weekly, anytime. If you have them, if they're concerned to abandoned vehicles or wastewater going into the rivers, I'd be more than happy to field those calls. And then, like JD said, we have a process. Sometimes that's going out, doing a site visit, getting information, and then sometimes that's a fees associated, or it goes to civil court for abatement process. So we do have a process, and it is in the Environmental Health and Safety Code. So send your concerns my way. I'd be more than happy to look into them.
Okay. And JD, like you said, I don't want to cause anybody a problem. It's just I'm more concerned about the ecosystem that involves this area. So
yep, absolutely. And I mean, and that's our charge. Our charge is to, I mean, the code is very, very clear. Thou shalt not have these situations. But we are also cognizant that people are in situations for a reason, and we want to help people get out of that situation. And try to help alleviate that situation as well. And like I said, sometimes it just takes a little bit extra time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Stefa. That was an excellent question. We have a couple more questions in the chat that I'm hoping we can get to. Althea wants to know, would housing, planning, turf, and public works be willing to create a climate conscious handbook for homeowners? Everything from home management to home construction and renovations. It's a big ask, but maybe a grant.
It does sound like a really good grant project.
Something we could look at in the future, because I know that this is an idea. When I was working at the Watershed Council, I know that they wanted to do kind of a welcome to Umatilla County kind of handbook, like a rural living handbook is what he called it, that kind of would go over those kinds of things. And to do something from a climate perspective, I think would be really, really interesting. So moving on. Bethy had a question. She wanted to know a question for planning. Have you considered implementing the CTUIR river vision beyond restricting development in the FEMA floodway? Because their maps rely heavily on levees, and levees are not very consistent with the philosophy of the river vision.
So a couple things on this is technically the river vision is not the CTUIR river vision because it's never been adopted by the board. And so it's only within the DNR. And even though it's an old plan, it's actually, we cannot find any evidence that was ever actually considered or adopted by the board. So it's kind of like this weird limbo document that we have. Second of all, the FEMA mapping that we have that has been completed on the previously did not necessarily take into account some of those old levees. So that that's not a hard and fast rule, but those levees are not necessarily highly influencing the location of the floodways on the FEMA mapping. So both those things, yes, we do and try to, but the floodway mapping is done exclusively by FEMA. And we have some public input and public comment on that. But my understanding is that actually the levees have very little influence on the location of those flood mapping lines.
Okay, thank you. So Marie Diodati put some resources in the chat, and I don't know if she is still on, if she wants to tell us really quickly about some of those resources. Marie?
Hi, I just wanted, because of the questions around recycling, this is like really further down the line because the bill is currently in the legislation. So before, and it, knock on wood, if everything goes well with the state legislation, there's a huge bill around modernizing the recycling system in Oregon because of the reasons you stated before, Colleen, with the access to markets, and a lot of the work, just the details of the bill are on the Oregon DEQ website link that I shared, just to kind of figure out what's the different parts of it. It could greatly evolve, but hopefully if it does go through, maybe there's going to be like funding that comes from that legislation that potentially could help out any type of initiatives and access to recycling infrastructure that would be needed. So it's more of like a keep an eye on it, because if it does go through, there's great things that could come out of it. And another big part of it is making sure producers are actually involved in this process, because they're the one creating all this packaging and this waste. So making sure they're a part of the equation is something that is trying to be integrated in the language or in this bill.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I know that conversations about waste management, we need to include manufacturers in those conversations, because it can be very difficult to make good choices. Ashley said, you know, try and buy less single-use plastic. That's kind of impossible. And so manufacturers really need to be involved in this process and be responsible for taking back some of the waste or dealing with some of the waste that they help generate. So thank you. Those are wonderful resources. We do have one more question in the chat. Dara wanted to ask, for the proposed July grounds area, what are the plans for the lighting of the paths and trails? It would be nice to have them possibly lit up by solar lights or something for safety purposes at night. The trail behind the old Yellow Hawk is a good example of the lack of lighting and that leading to, quote, after hours activity. Also, while it's great that we have a bike path along the Mission Highway, it shouldn't be used for parking for the homes along the road between Mission Market and the grain elevator.
It's a lot. So the proposed for the July grounds are was discussed as these are just concepts about utilization. And so so a lot of the comments we've got back on that were like the length of the eaves on the longhouse, you know. So I think we're not there yet. We're just about the location of these buildings and the location of the functions of those and how they're actually arranged, and we're not to the point of like how long the eaves are on the longhouse. I do think that lighting is very, very important for all this, but that the purpose of the July ground project is to try to identify the types of uses that will go there, and then we can start prioritizing those to get funding through the BOT or through other grant opportunities in order to be able to construct those projects. Lighting and safety is always going to be a part of that decision process as we're going forward. I know that the students, they did a capital improvements project probably about 3 or 4 years ago that had that as one of their projects is for lighting project up along the Temecula Cultural Institute trail, and I think it's a great project, but it's just not to say it's a smaller project that kind of falls through the cracks, but that's kind of what's happening. And so as long as we have somebody keep asking for it, then I think things happen that way. And so it's a complex question because these are very large projects and very, very diversified timelines. But the specificity of having lighting on the trail is on a different timeline.
And I think the lighting as well, once we have an energy strategy plan that kind of emphasizes some of these extra things, lighting and such, we can go after certain pots of money, like the Energy Trust of Oregon has several different initiatives. So those things are in the future. So keep bringing them up and keep bringing these suggestions to us.
Excellent. Wenix, I see that you have your hand up, and I'll get to you in a second, but Lindsay, you asked a question, and I was wondering if you wanted to speak to it a little bit rather than just have me read it out of the chat.
I'm just still waiting to see who's taking responsibility for it. I'm waiting for somebody. It's one of those things that gets passed around back and forth, and nobody said, I got it. I'm waiting to hear that answer.
That I would say that entire area is difficult because there's intersection between public works, DNR, and housing, and before that there was Yellowhawk and then education. So there were 5 entities and the Longhouse on top of it, and so there were like 5 or 6 entities that were all within one piece of property, and it was really kind of hard to tease out like who's like, you know, Frank's responsible for the road, but who's responsible for the Spring Creek and who's responsible for the trail. And I think Yellowhawk actually got the grant for the trail, or part of it, but then Yellowhawk's not there anymore. And so it's just, I think it's not easy to answer that for that specific property. It's just there's so many competing interests and people that are involved with that. I know it's not me.
I guess that's where everyone's being.
That's fair. These are complicated problems.
Yeah, I just want to comment too, is like JD mentions, it's kind of morphed into something different, but I think that, you know, I think we're tag teaming it. I think at times we'll address issues and sometimes it'll get addressed by somebody else, but you know, in the future, I think we can probably sort that out. I think a big player is the July grounds kind of future, but certainly we'll do what we have to do to keep it okay. And that's the trail that leaves Confederated Way and goes south, correct, to Muslick? Is that what we're speaking of? The asphalt walkway? We froze.
Yes, that's the one. I apologize for the freezing. So
we will address it. There's a few things to address on it. Some of it is weed spraying, some of it is some maintenance to it, and I know there was questions about whether there was I don't know if there's a water fountain along there or not, to be honest with you. Yeah, so there's not, yes or no? No.
Well, it's obvious that Frank's been saying not I for a while because he hasn't walked the trail.
I'm gonna get to it, I promise you. This spring.
That's all we got right now, man.
it was beautiful the other day. I walked it when it was beautiful and warm. It's a lovely trail, Frank. You should get out there. Wenix, I think you have your hand up, and I think that we can make this the last question. And so I would love for you to speak with us, please.
It's not just the last question, it's just the importance of lighting within our areas. And I don't know if there's ever been a study done on the places that our youth walk and our women walk and our people that are targeted and have been followed and they have been preyed upon. And I say this because and I know, you know, we have other like why they're concerns because we have kids out there. I can tell you multiple stories of my friends being raped in dusk right along the roads, being thrown in ditches, walking through in between that trail from the new housing to the old housing where the Cayuse was. And not this one, I've had friends been raped and bound and found up there on TCI trail, raped and bound. And I can tell you 10 different stories of this. And this is just in my area, and not only just our young. And so I worry, and it should be higher priority. It should be looked at, where are our youth going? And when we're driving along those corners, there's some areas that are so dark that, you know, it fears me. And especially we got human trafficking and we got these other things. And in those areas where people could be coming through from other places, those could be really targeted areas that they could stake out. So I think that we need to look at that as a possibility. If we have to go after grant funding, can they go at it in that type of way to get funding related to some of those things? Because I think it needs to be a bigger emphasis, because there are things that are happening out there in those dark places, and they have been for years and years, and I think it is important.
I just want to say I hear you and I appreciate you sharing. first and foremost. And then second, I think the energy security or strategy plan will assist us with being eligible to get grant funding, to be able to put lighting in certain areas. And I definitely would appreciate if you would share, certain areas that you know of through email, that are dark areas, so we can map those out and know those for future grant opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to provide you with areas that I know that are treacherous for people, and where I know that women will kind of walk to avoid, or they only go through there with people. And you wouldn't know that. Other people that haven't lived in this area wouldn't really know that. Other than that, thank you for your presentations. You guys have done really amazing on the work that you have been doing. And I know that it's a huge topic and this area is really large. And thank you for hearing me out. But listening to that kind of brought up a lot about that. And thank you for taking the time to do that. And I really enjoyed hearing everything that our tribe is doing, working for, especially for the housing, because I remember my dad being on the housing committee, and we owned our house, but he was on there because we had he did cars, and so he had some pollution issues that he had, so he had always been in the housing just to kind of be part of that and to be able to look at all those things, but how important it was to our elders or people to provide housing. And I know that we've been a little bit on the behind versus other tribes, and so I'm glad that we're getting to the point that we can provide that, because especially for the families that have had the COVID situations, our families are packed in houses, and we're lucky that it didn't knock down more people than it did. I think we all did a really good job considering staying in places, but we have a lot of families that are, locked down together. And even with our family alone on our plot, we couldn't even stay within the 6-person and 1 family limit because of how big our families sit within our 2 house plots. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing houses going up and everything you guys are doing. At least we're getting there. That's a great thing. Thank you for all of your presentations.
Thank you. We do actually have one more person. Zara, I see you have your hand up. Please share with us.
I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Nix for kind of helping out and giving some examples of that, because I think while it's easy to think of these as proposed plans and things in the pipeline, that is literally going to be in my backyard for those July grounds. And so me thinking about the lighting ahead of time is me thinking, are people going to be walking behind our house, and is it going to be lit up? Are people going to be hanging out doing things? We're actually right in the area living there. So I think Nick's bringing those examples out, that really helps show that does need to be a consideration an early conversation. So, but thank you for your presentations today. I've enjoyed all of them.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's important to remember that there are real people behind these conversations. Every conversation that we have has real implications for people's lives. And so thank you for reminding us of that. And I know that we're starting to see more and more of a recognized connection between the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement and the fossil fuel extractive industry. And so there is potential, maybe we can pursue missing and murdered Indigenous women's funds for like a lighting project too. So there are very real connections. So thank you. I wanted to invite everyone to give us closing thoughts if they have them, because we're a little bit over time, and I'm just so thankful for everyone's knowledge today. Anyone want to say some final words?
This is Tanner from Housing. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Colleen, for asking us to be a presenter today.
Frank, Colleen, thank you again, and it's interesting. I present, but I learned a lot too, so I'm glad I was watching.
This is Holly. I just wanted to thank Wenix for sharing that, and Danny Schulte, our transportation planner, has working on grants related to paths and safety related to those paths. So if you could send her maybe, specifics, I think that she would be able to keep track of those and at, some point in the future, perhaps apply for a grant for them.
Thoughts, JD?
Oh, I mean, I can talk for hours on all this stuff because this is what I do. I mean, urban development patterns, energy efficiency, urban economics, and I can tie all this into health. I know the next presentation I think is actually on health. Is it health and human services? Again, it gets back into that, all back into health, and even to the examples that Wenix brought up as well, and because that's definitely a health issue as well, and people's safety. But just making walkable neighborhoods, making sure things are walkable, making sure that people are able to get around. I'm sure you guys will hear about this next week, but the CHIP we did, the Community Health Improvement Plan or assessment, we had 92% overweight rate and a 54% obesity rate. Which is almost twice the national average. I mean, we are in that is our #1 health crisis. And the best way of doing that is just moderate to light physical activity, which is just walking 300 or 400 yards a day. I mean, it's literally just walking around the block. And we're just literally not doing that. And I think, and some of that is our patterns, some of that is our sidewalks, some of that is the type of infrastructure we live in, scattered sites that you can't actually walk anywhere, you have to drive places, and these are personal choices. I know somebody who lived in the projects who would drive to work at the governance center when the governance center was down by Old Yellowhawk. They would drive literally 400 feet to their office. These are choices that we're making every day. I've seen people in the governance center drive to Yellowhawk. That's a choice to drive to Yellowhawk 1,000 feet. So I just want everyone to really think about that all these things are tied together, and a lot of it comes back to our personal choices.
Thank you. That is really good to remember. And that sets me up actually nicely for just the last thing. We're gonna thank you so much to all of our presenters and the amazing information that we've had today, and we look forward to continuing these conversations. I have up a slide for the contact information that we'll make sure everybody gets. And then, as JD set us up, next time we will be meeting March 19th to talk about health. And so we have some really great speakers to talk with us about health. Public health. Sidel Harrison is a CTUIR tribal member who's doing her PhD in public health, and she'll be talking with us about Indigenous perspectives on how do we tie all of this information together to be better for the people. We'll also have Caleb Minthorn is going to talk about air quality and really the invisible hazards that exist in the air that we breathe every day. We're going to welcome Wenix back to talk about cultural connectivity and first foods as a medicine with the first foods excursions that Cultural Resources has been putting on. And then we'll have Althea Wolf will come and talk with us about the work that CTUIR's Health Commission does and some of the ways that tribal sovereignty and health really actually improve the region, the whole region around it. And so we're really looking forward to that. And then we have our next webinar on climate and energy April 2nd. So look forward to announcements on that. And as always, we're going to be doing our raffle. And so I have Dara did a really amazing thing to get some raffle prizes. So we have a mystery raffle prize, but then we also are always giving away our air quality monitors. And so we'll be posting this webinar right after this, and so we'll give people the weekend to get that in, and we'll be drawing raffle names on Monday. So thank you so much again for being here. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to you for taking the time today, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. And I just want to say Achle Mashkinuta, and thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you guys later. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. Thank you always, Colleen, for setting everything up.